Thanks so much for listening to No Lions Here with me, Big Panda. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to No Lions Here. My name is Big Panda, and I'm a recovering sex addict. Before we jump in today's episode, I just want to go ahead and plug the socials. Go check us out on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, all of the major ones at nolionshere.com. That's the website, actually, not the social. The socials are No Lions Here. And a shout out to my sponsor for this episode, Beginning Institute. I will throw their information in the description. So definitely go check them out and all the great work that they're doing. They've been a big part of my life and my journey. And so I'm just really grateful to partner with them moving forward. So really excited for that. And really excited about today's episode. On the episode with me today in our virtual studio is a brother of mine in the program. We met a couple years back doing some of the Zoom meetings. Same place that I met like Big Ticket and Haggard and Wes and Rev. Those guys have all been on the show before. And so my guest today was also in those rooms with me and how we got connected. And so we've known each other for the last couple years. And so we've kind of gone back and forth on some dates. So I'm really excited to finally have you on. Welcome to the show. Welcome to No Lions Here, Cody. Thanks so much for coming on, man. I really appreciate it.
Hey, I appreciate it, brother. I know it's been a long time coming. I feel like it's just been time after time, just having to reschedule and finally being able to sit it down and get it penciled in and going through. And man, I'm excited to be here, excited to just talk some recovery. I love it.
Yeah, man. And I want to say this, man, because I think that this is huge for us. I really appreciate and want to honor the courage that you have to come on here. A lot of people in the program and deal with the addiction that we deal with, they're not going to be public with their story. And I totally understand that. So it's really special when, I get to come across guys and meet with guys that have that willingness and the courage to come on and share their story, because I truly believe that this is just not talked about enough. And so the more people that I can get to come on, I just think it's really special. And again, I just want to honor the courage that you have to be able to do this. So thank you so much for this, man. I really appreciate it. Again, thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that, man. To the deepest part of my heart, I appreciate that, because I fully get it. It's hard to get on here, to say your name, to show your face, with everything that comes with it. It's such a taboo topic that, everybody's afraid of talking about. And, there's such high statistics of men and women that struggle with this, and just to be able to voice it and get it out, and just to be able to share our stories, right? Like, the one thing I've learned in recovery is sharing your story not only takes the power away from the evil that was created from all of it, but it allows God to work through your story, and that's the real victory, right? Like, not just that there's the healing that comes, but also to allow somebody else to grow from your story too, right? Like, there's healing from your story. And, even if that's one person that gets to hear your story and they're like, man, I can relate to that, and it's possible, and all those things. Cause you get into those meetings and you're like, man, I'm the only one. And boom, 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 boom. You're like, well, that's me. Okay, that's me. And just down the line. Yes. And so just being able to relate and have that community and just know that you are not alone is so vital, man. And so, yeah, I really feel like God has been honoring my story, and I want him to continue to honor my story. And so, it's also my duty to give back to other dudes, other men, that have been in the same position I have.
Yeah, man. Well said there. Like, again, that whole idea of being alone. I'm sure you can relate to this, but when we're in it and caught up in that system, in that cycle, we feel alone. We feel like no one will understand what I'm doing. There's shame and guilt involved, and to go into a room of people that I don't know and hear somebody say something that, like, oh man, like, yeah, I can relate to that. Like, that's what keeps us coming back. Absolutely, is knowing that we're not alone, and that I have a place where I can go to share the deepest, darkest parts of me and be met with understanding, love, and support.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's just the greatest aspect of it, man. You just
Mhm.
hit the nail on the head there. Is just being able to have that support and to know that like there's somebody that's going to meet you where you're at and meet you with that understanding. Like, dude, I get you. I understand. Like, I feel exactly what you feel. Like that empathy level is just unreal, you know. And I remember, you know, sharing any part of my story with guys in group for the first time. You're like, man, I don't want to tell this to another person, you know, much less another guy. You know, and then you're sharing it and you're like, man, there's some freedom in that. And then to be met with like, hey man, it's okay. You know, I'm here. I feel it. I've experienced it. I know where you're at. You know, like there is just real healing in hearing another person, another human being, like tell you that, you know, like
Yeah.
you're not, you know, so broken and so messed up that, you know, you can't be okay. You know, like there's healing
Yeah.
there, and somebody else understands it and has been there.
Yeah. Yeah. It breaks up that image too of the monster that I have painted myself to be in my head.
Mm-hmm.
I again, I'm sure you can relate to this, and a lot of people can. Like, I viewed myself as a monster,
Mm-hmm.
as a
Yeah,
total monster.
yeah, I completely agree. Same thing, and you know, there's still times where those images come back of
Mm.
who I was. You know, and it was. I mean, it full on. It was a monster that was uncontrollable. It was uncontrolled. You know, there were no chains. There was no nothing. It was just unleashed. And yeah, it's hard. I mean, I don't feel that way now, but there's definitely reminders of, man, that's who I was, and that's hard,
Hmm.
man. Still to this day, it's hard to combat, like just thinking of what you were capable of, you know. So I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That's a really good point because there's times where I forget what I'm capable of doing,
Mm-hmm.
and that I know that I have the tools today and the support system to know that, like, okay, I don't ever have to be that person ever again. However, like, you know, there's still that possibility that I can inflict that kind of hurt on not only myself and other people as well. And that's very scaring and humbling and sobering to think, like, oh wow, like, you know, just because I'm working on things and I'm in a good place doesn't mean that, like, I can't go back to that. And that's something that I think that for me I have to kind of remember, because I can forget very quickly the things that I've done and the hurt that I've inflicted, and I try not to live in that place. But it definitely does kind of rear its ugly head every once in a while, for sure.
Yeah, I think there's some benefits of being able to just have that reminder of where you came from, right? Like we're all one bad decision away from just screwing it all up again, right? You know, like
Hmm. Yeah.
one bad decision, you know, is it's insane to think about that it's that way, but it's so true. You know, and that's why it's so important for us to just constantly be, you know, cognizant of what we're doing, what's going on around us, and everything like that. Because fortunately, God gives us some reminders sometimes, and I'm sure you can probably relate to that. Like, hey, I didn't cross a line, but man, if I didn't stop or I didn't put the brakes on or anything like that, like we could have gotten to that point. Um,
Yeah.
you know, and so it's fortunately we have a loving God that loves to remind us, but remind us in a healthy way before we get to a certain point. But yeah, it's that sobering thought of, well, man, I'm capable of doing a lot of things if I don't keep my head on straight. You know, and I feel like that's just part of recovery. I feel like it's just that constant reminder, like, hey, man, you got to keep your head on straight. If you don't, you know, you very well could do a 180 and go in the wrong direction because you're either moving forward or backward. You got to pick which one you want to go.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. There's actually a guy from that Zoom group that we were in, was I think he would say this a lot, like, yes, this is an addiction, it's also a disease of forgetfulness.
Mm.
And that I am quick to forget, those times where, hey man, remember the way that made you feel. When I would step out of my recovery and relapse and act out, and I almost forget sometimes what that does to me internally. Like, I'm a single guy, I'm not in a relationship, so there's been times around thoughts and feelings of like, well, I'm not hurting anybody else, I'm not with somebody, but it's like, all right, well, yeah, maybe I'm not betraying a partner, but man, I'm betraying myself, I'm betraying my authentic true self, because my authentic true self really doesn't want to be taking part in these behaviors. And I'm quick. I can forget the hurt that it causes me on the other side of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, married, single, at the end of the day, it's still being true to who we are, right?
Yeah.
As men and who God created us to be. And so if we're not continuing to have that mindset, I mean, like you said, I mean, yeah, I'm not hurting anybody else, but you're hurting yourself, right? And unless we're being the authentic selves that we are, our authentic, person, then we can't give that to our spouse, right? And you can't give that to the next person that comes into your life that you want to be with, And
Mm-hmm.
so if we're not being that person, we got nothing to give away. We got nothing
Yep.
to share because we can't even share it with ourselves, And so I
Mm-hmm.
fully get that. I mean, obviously, being in a marriage is a little bit different. Sometimes there's more immediate consequences, Um, but yeah, I mean, it's still all the same. We are who we are, and we have to be that person. We have to
Yeah.
be our authentic selves.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, man. Yeah, that's what this is all about for me is like, all right, who am I and how can I live in that authenticity, on a day-to-day basis? And sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's a struggle, it ebbs and flows, recovery's not linear, it's up and down, man, peaks and valleys. And, I really got to look at, all right, what's my spiritual condition right now? Because I truly believe that at the end of the day, recovery is a spiritual program. It's a spiritual program. It's a spiritual solution to issues that are too big for me to handle on my own.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of those things that you can say there's recovery without God. And okay, I mean, sure, some people could work that process, but I just don't think that my recovery could be that without Him. You know,
Yeah.
there's just so much that being able to lean on God and seeing all the things that He's done for me throughout my recovery and just pulling me out of what I did and just the constant miracles in and out of what He continued to do and continues to do to this day and the change that's happened. I mean, I couldn't do that on my own.
Yeah.
I couldn't do that with just one person's help. For me, there's no doubt in my mind that all came from Him, and He's the one that's been constantly changing who I am and creating me more and more, molding me more into who He created me to be. A buddy of mine that's a really close friend in recovery, he tells me all the time that, God's not finished. He's not finished with the work that He's doing in you. And every time we have a conversation, anytime I'm having a difficult time and we're on the phone, that's what He reminds me of every single time. And it's so true. The work is never finished.
Mm-hmm.
Until,
Yeah.
until we're upstairs and we're hanging out with the Father, the work is constantly going all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. And, luckily with that, I'm far enough along in my recovery because I know earlier on, man, that was kind of daunting, kind of a daunting thing. And, when I talk to newcomers, I try not to, because it's not doom and gloom, but I know what it's like to be a newcomer and think, wow, like, oh my gosh, I have to, maintain this sort of, lifestyle, whatever the work for the rest of my life. And it can be very daunting. However, I'm grateful to be in a place where it's like, okay, I get to look at it it's an opportunity of gratitude and like, oh wow, like, because this work allows us to maintain our authentic selves and be the best version of ourselves. And if I'm continually working to be my best self, that's where I want to live. And if that takes me hitting meetings and working a program for the rest of my life, well, then so be it, because that's what's helping me. So, I get to have this opportunity to, work on myself. And things are always going to come up, right? There's no destination. The destination is the end game.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you said it perfectly. I mean, it's just that constant goal to change, right? Like it's an opportunity. I think that's the best way that one can say that is you get to do that, right? Like I get to every day choose to love my wife. I get to choose to love my kids, right? Like before recovery, that wasn't the case, right? Like it was a burden almost to take care of kids, or it was a burden to do whatever it was. And, after you go through the hurt and the pain that you cause a spouse, and to be able to be on the other end of that and go, you know what, man, it is a blessing that every single day I get to wake up and I get to see my wife. You know, like whether we're angry at each other or whether it was something stupid that we talked about and we're both just upset or frustrated, like it's still an opportunity that I get to be with her, right?
Yeah.
Especially after all the pain that I caused her, to be able to get that. And, you know, having this conversation right here is even just like another great reminder of just continuing to change that mindset and the way that I think of like, man, it's an opportunity. It's a chance that I get to spend with my wife. It's a chance that I get to spend with my kids because without recovery, I wouldn't have that. You know, she would be gone. The kids wouldn't be here and I wouldn't get to be a father and a husband and living that life that God created for me. Um, but at the end of the day, I had a choice, right? Like I had a choice to step into and lean into my recovery and say, hey, you know what? This isn't going to defeat me. Or I had a chance to walk away. And that's what's true, right? Like I could have very well been like, I'm done. I'll do what I want. You know, yeah, you found out, but you know, I'm going to go continue to live in my world of sin and pain and hurt and all that. But fortunately, that's not what happened, you know, and I couldn't thank God more for it every single day of my life that I chose the other path. And I said, hey, you know what? I'm in the wrong. I caused the hurt. I caused the pain. And whatever it takes for me to become a better man, I'm going to do it. And every day it's still having to do the same thing. I mean, almost 4 years into recovery, it's the same thing. And I still have to make that choice every single day. Um, and it's crazy to think, kind of like you said, like, you know, man, I have to live this, you know, for the rest of my life. Yeah, but it gets a little bit easier when you know, start to change that mindset and have a different viewpoint of things. You know, like there's a lot of behavior modifications that you start early on that just kind of set you up for success, right? Like a lot of those things that you do early on, you don't have to think about anymore, right? Like I don't have
Yeah.
to think about the fact that every night my phone I plug in and I put on the dresser. It doesn't sleep next to my bed. I don't even think about it. It doesn't cross my mind. Automatically grab my phone, plug it in, put it on the dresser. You know, something small, right? Like it's such a tiny thing, but for men who are continuing to struggle with, you know, getting on their phones and looking at pornography or scrolling through, you know, social media or those kind of things, and that's, you know, a problem. Well, I don't have that problem because I'm not scrolling. I'm not sitting in my bed at midnight scrolling on my phone because it's not even with me, you know? And so it's just taking things out that don't even need to be there, you know? But I don't think about those things anymore. You know, 4 years in, you know, those are small things that it's just another part of my day.
Yeah. Yeah. You brought up a really good word there, and that is choice.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like because you're just like you, man. When I got discovered, I had a choice. What was I going to do? Was I going to continue to live that lifestyle, or was I going to make the choice to get help? You know, and every day when I wake up in the morning, we always have a choice. And that is kind of, you know, the beauty of life is that I get a choice. No one's standing over me telling me what to do. Like, it's up to me. What do I want? And I'm learning that I can trust my choices today. Whereas I used to not be able to trust my choices because they were
Mm-hmm.
they were not good. You know, I was caught up in a pursuit that was so much deeper than me or that I realized. And yeah, man, like early on in recovery, like some of I feel like that's where like so obviously we're constantly working on ourselves in recovery, but earlier on in recovery, you really gotta like batten down and do some things that are really uncomfortable until they turn into a routine, into a habit to where, okay, now I'm, like you said, I'm not even thinking about some of these things. These things are just normal everyday habits and routines for me. And I feel off if something that I'm used to doing doesn't happen. Like if I don't talk to my sponsor in a day, I'm like, man, I feel off. I need to go call him, you know, or just so many things where like again, you kind of got to go really hard at the beginning, and then once you kind of get into a routine, it doesn't feel so hard. It's not so laboring and daunting to kind of keep up with those habits and routines that you've formed because you've put in the work. Now, it doesn't mean that I can slack off. and maybe I need to change some things around. However, I have more of the willingness to do those things because I've seen how well that they work for me.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I mean, it's so easy to change things around, like you said, when you've already watched yourself make such vast changes. What's a minute change? You know, little things here or there that you start doing. You're like, hey, you know what? That's really not working for me anymore. So I'm gonna do this.
Yeah.
You know, and they work. You know, it's one of those things that you know your recovery and you know what you need. And you just have to shift it around. You know, and sometimes that's what it takes. But um, yeah, I mean, you become a lot more open and a lot more willing to do a lot of different things to ensure that you're continuing to stay, you know, on a positive trajectory.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, man. So, kind of shifting gears a little bit here. So, I know we just jumped right into it, but I want to get back to like, hey, man, what brought Cody? What happened to Cody to bring you into the program, and kind of what did that look like for you? That kind of was that thump on the head of like, hey, man, I need to get my stuff together because the way that I'm living is not working.
Yeah, absolutely. So my story started about 4 years ago. I was at home. My wife came home in the middle of the night. She was working nights, confronted me, um, just basically laid out all this information that she had. And I lied. I lied, said, no, I didn't do that. I haven't been doing X, Y, and Z. I haven't been having conversations, this, that, and the other. And finally, I want to say it was 2, 3 days later, I came clean with most of my information. My problem that I struggled with a lot was omitting the truth. I tell you what you needed to know, but you didn't need to know all of it, right? That was my way of protecting you as far as I was concerned, but it was really protecting myself.
Yeah.
And so it kind of all blew up all at once. My wife was just getting messages and texts and everything from all these different sources with just information about everything that I had done, and I couldn't express things quick enough because it was coming in faster than I could handle. It was just this whirlwind that just got out of control so fast. And my wife is the strongest person on the face of the earth because she looked at me and was like, "You need to either you fix this or I'm gone. Like you either go and get help or I'm leaving and I'm taking our son with me." And that was one of those things. That was that pivotal moment where I had a choice that either I had to go and get help or I was losing my wife and son right there in that moment.
Mm.
And, I have no doubt that God pulled me in that direction to get help. Man, he put me in the perfect situation. And when I say that is my sister works for a church. She was working for a church at the time that had some specialists in that particular field in recovery. They had an actual men's meeting group on Monday nights that were for men who had sexual addiction, food eating disorders, pornography, alcohol, and you go and you meet on Mondays and you sat there and you would discuss what was going on. And not only that, but she personally knew a CSAT, and I ended up going to him within the first week. And so I got one of the best CSATs in the area, and I was already immediately going to groups. Well, then my therapist then also turned me over to a men's group that met on Tuesdays and Thursdays every week. So then I started going to this 12-step faith-based program. And then also SA calls. So then I started getting on the SA calls, and that's where me and you had met early on in those phone calls. And so like I was just thrown into this world of recovery and not having any idea what I was getting myself into, being terrified, absolutely terrified that I was going to lose my wife, terrified that I just didn't know what kind of conversations I was going to be having. Next thing I know, I'm having, these deep, intense conversations about, my sexual history and the hurt and pain that I have, from childhood and from, junior high school, my entire life. I'm having these deep conversations and expressing this stuff that I ain't got no clue existed, and so just continue to work that program and work that process, going to therapy I think it was like once a week for 3, 4 months, and was doing, 2 or 3 meetings, and it slowly tapers off. I mean, you
Sure.
probably understand, as your
Hmm.
recovery grows and you grow, it tapers off a little bit. Um, but yeah, I was still going to meetings, and still, I started my own men's group, that meets every Wednesday night. It's a faith based that we do virtual Zoom. It's from some guys that I met from, back home, um, and now God has blessed us enough to where me and my wife actually counsel, or coach, not counsel, but coach, other couples that are going through the
Oh,
same
that's
thing.
awesome.
Yeah, so we ended up getting an opportunity to work with a company, and yeah, we coach couples through, discovery, through recovery, the whole process, of this healing and how it works. And the most interesting part about it, and I tell any of our clients that we coach, is we're school of hard knocks taught, right? Like, I didn't get a degree in this. I learned the hard way what works, what doesn't, how to converse with my wife, how to handle triggers, how to handle my own triggers, how to handle my own behavior modifications, and all of those things. So um, it's a complete 180 from where I was to where we are now. Um, but it's just, it goes to show like what God is capable of doing, right? Like, to be at the lowest point of my life where my wife had every right to walk away and never look back.
Sure.
I mean, and she still, to this day, I still believe she has every right to walk away and never look back, right? Like, she still has that right from the day that happened to the day that I die. She still has that choice and still has that right because of the hurt and the pain that I caused her.
Sure. Yeah.
But to see where that was and then to see where I am now, like, man, God can do some serious work, dude. I mean, he can really throw down, and it's just about trusting him and trusting his process, and just knowing that it's going to hurt and you got to lean into the suck for a long time. But, like we always say in recovery, you got to feel it to heal it. And if you don't, then, you're never going to get past it. And so, yeah, I was sitting here today just, so thankful to be able to be on this call with you, and just to be able to, be in a place where I feel like God's still doing a lot of work in my life, and making good come of my story. My
Yeah.
story, I just want someone else to be able to benefit from what I've had to go through. Like, if I can just prevent one guy from going through the hurt and the pain and everything that I had to, because of the mistakes that I made, because I didn't know how to stop the cycle, then, man, if I can just help one, then this has all been worth it. If I can bring just one man to Christ through this whole process, all worth it.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, and that's kind of where we're at now.
Yeah. Yeah, man. Dude, thank you for sharing all that, man. I really appreciate it. Again, I said this at the beginning, like, it takes a lot of courage to come out here and do this. And man, I love hearing the work that you and your wife are doing, helping others. It's wild how, we can turn such a dark place of pain into a source of light for other people. And, I can really relate to that. Getting into recovery has spurred me to go out and want to help other people as well, working at a treatment center, becoming a recovery coach so I can share the message and help other people. And, the power of God that you kind of touched on too, man, like, sounds like, with you, right place, right time for you getting into the program. And that's, by no coincidence. I'm a firm believer that in recovery and in practicing a spiritual program, like, there's no coincidences in this world. Everything happens for a reason. And even now, if I look back on my life, even prior to getting into recovery, there were so many things that happened that I just kind of chalked up to privilege, but in reality, looking back on it now, it's like, no, like, there was something bigger than me looking out for me, trying to guide me. I wasn't ready to make that choice yet, though. There were so many things that happened to me, and I just kind of, I was like, oh, I grew up in the church, and there's a song that's like, you can't help but be blessed when you're raised by God's finest. And so I just kind of thought I had some residual kind of something kind of rubbed off onto me. But I've been really fortunate in my life and my story to be able to, learn and grow from the things that happened to me. So man, I think that's awesome that, again, what you guys are doing and setting up a group. I mean, again, getting into recovery, not everybody's going to do this, but it has sparked something in you. It has sparked something in me to want to go out there and help other people and to be of service and to just spread the message of hope and that recovery is possible and that there is hope out there. You got to ask for it though.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. I mean, that's the whole 12-step process, right?
Yeah.
12 steps giving back. And yeah, 1,000%. I have such a passion for helping other men, dude. It's unreal just to help other men understand, like, man, it's possible. Like, it's truly, truly possible to find healing in this process, to not be that person anymore. I mean, I remember just thinking, man, there's no way that I can even go a week without porn. Couldn't happen. Like, I was lucky if I went 2 months, my entire life, 2 months without it. And I'm almost 4 years without it.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it's insane to think that that's even possible, and to think that me, of all people, was capable. And so, like, that's where all that passion and drive comes from. It's like, man, if I'm capable of doing it, I promise you can too, because there was no bigger coward in this world than me. Man, I would run from a problem in a heartbeat. There wasn't anything that I wasn't willing to run from, and I wouldn't face it. I didn't want anything to do with it. But now it's like, there's a confidence that God gives you, that willingness to just stand, put your feet in the ground and fight for what's important. And I didn't have that before. I didn't have that before recovery. Recovery, taught me that it exists within me. I just have to seek it and to explore it. But yeah, man, there's definitely, kind of like you said, just that passion for just wanting to help other men in recovery. That's like, I know you don't want to talk about it. I know that you don't want to discuss it, but it's like, the second that you do and the second that you can find help with it, like, so much can change in your life. Like, you can finally be free of those, chains of just pain and suffering that you just don't realize you have. I remember telling a buddy of mine one time, it was like I was black and white is all that I could see. And once recovery started, all of a sudden I could see color. I could start to see actual joy in life. I could find joy in the smallest things. And that's recovery in a nutshell, man. It's being able to just express and feel your life the way that it's supposed to be. And it's unreal. And I want that for other men. I want that for other guys to be able to understand that the power is real. You can do this.
Yeah. Yeah, everybody is capable. We all have what it takes to find that joy and that color in life inside of us. I know I was a really big external validation guy. That dates back to my childhood and how I was raised. And, we look for outside external things to fix us. And I remember, in treatment, hey guys, I just want to take a minute to share something deeply personal and transformative in my journey of recovery. I've been where you might be right now, struggling with the weight of addiction and feeling lost. But there's a place that offered me a new beginning, a place I truly believe in. It's called Begin Again Institute. At Begin Again, they understand the deep-rooted trauma behind addiction. Their 14-day intensive program for men tackles the neurobiological aspects of addiction head-on. It's not just about breaking a habit. It's about understanding and healing the underlying trauma that formed it in the first place. And for those who have been impacted by betrayal, Begin Again extends care to partners of addicts too. Their partner support program is offered at no additional cost to the family and runs alongside the men's intensive. This program helps participants gain an understanding of the trauma they've experienced and sets them on their own path to healing. If you or someone you love are grappling with sexual addiction, pornography addiction, or intimacy issues, Begin Again Institute can be that pivotal step towards recovery and a new lease on life. Remember, you can't go back and change the past, but it's never too late to begin again. To learn more about their life-changing program, visit beginagaininstitute.com or call 720-776-9076 to reserve your spot in the next 2-week intensive. I promise, it'll be the best call that you ever make for yourself. Stay strong, keep fighting, and keep tuning in to No Lions Here for more conversations about recovery, resilience, and hope. I'm talking about like, hey, you have everything inside of you to give yourself what you need and to fix yourself. And, I still struggle with some of that external things from now and then. Again, at the end of the day, we're human beings. We're human beings. We make mistakes. We have flaws. I'm never going to be perfect. I am not a robot. As much as sometimes I like to think I'm a robot, like I'm not a robot. And I got to give myself that grace and compassion in that, there's going to be things that happen that disappoint me and let me down, but I don't have to deal with it the same way that I've always dealt with it. I can learn to forgive, accept, and give myself grace and compassion and cut myself some slack too. Cut myself slack and give myself credit. That's what the program has taught me. And it's still, again, it's a work in progress. Absolutely. But the fact that the awareness is there and I have what it needs to give myself those things, I'll figure it out. I'll figure it out one day at a time. I'll figure it out. I don't have to have it all figured out today. That's the beauty of it too, is I don't have to, what can I do today? What can I not do today? And accepting that there's things that I can't do for myself today that's going to take more time.
Yeah, I mean, I think you said it. Grace. That's the best gift throughout this entire process is grace. Grace from God, grace from your loved ones, grace from your friends, grace for yourself. Because if you're not giving yourself grace throughout this process, you're going to fail. Because all we do early on, at least speaking for myself, is you create these expectations, right? And expectations are nothing but just an opportunity to allow failure, because we expect something. And the minute that we expect something is the minute that you've already messed up, because nothing's going to happen the way that we want it to. And so being able to give ourselves grace, yes, you may have done, one particular thing, but you didn't let it go further than it needed to, right? Like you stopped the cycle. Like maybe you were getting here, but you stopped it, right? Like that doesn't make it okay, but hey, you know what? There's some victory there, right? Like, and you have to accept those small victories early on. And that's the hard part, especially early, is you have to take those small victories and see that small victories actually turn out to be pretty big victories, right? Like I tell my clients all the time, when you get yourself in a situation and your spouse isn't going to like it, maybe you did something stupid and your spouse is really going to be very upset about it, and rightfully so. But you know what? You're not in the same position you were, 6 months ago, are you? You chose to go the opposite direction. You chose to deviate from who your addict was and who you would have been 6 months ago.
Yeah.
Right. Like there's so much victory in that. Our spouses are never going to see it that way. And that's okay. They're not expected to. But in your own recovery, if you're choosing to step away from something, you're making a conscious decision to not do things the way that you did before, just because it's not perfect on how you got to that point doesn't mean it's not a massive victory. And you have to give yourself grace in that, right? Like you have to say, dude, that's a big deal. And I remember struggling with that so much early on, and having, my sponsor and, other brothers that are like, hey man, I know you don't see this, but that's a big deal. That's a big victory. And, it's hard. Hindsight's 2020. You can look back and say, you know what, man, that was a big victory. That really was a big step. But it's hard early on to give yourself grace, but that's one of the biggest things that we can do for ourselves in recovery is giving ourselves grace, because you're not perfect. Like you said, you're not a robot, and you're not going to get everything right. I sure didn't. I still don't. Yeah. I still mess up, but my job is to mess up a lot less,
Yeah.
My job is to be the best version of me, but the best version of me is not perfect. Right. Yeah. Like I still get mad. I still get upset. I still handle myself, where I get frustrated at things that I shouldn't, but that's part of the process. That's the beauty of grace that God gives us.
Yeah. Yeah. That saying, progress, not perfection. That
Mm-hmm.
I know that that's really carried me in certain times, because it's like, yeah, sure, maybe I jumped on the ride, but you know what? I got off before it got to that bad point. And I'm so hard on myself in that aspect of like, yeah, well, you get caught up in the shoulda, woulda, couldas, and it's like, okay, well, did you follow all the way through with that? No.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. That is a small victory, and for me in recovery, I need all the small victories that I can get, because those are going to add up and add up and add up. And you brought up another good point too, of we're so hard at being objective of ourselves. When I am in the storm, it's so hard for me to pull back and see that, hey, on the other side of those clouds, there's sun.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm so stuck in the eye of the storm that all I can see is gray and gloom, and I can't see anything else. And that's why we need brothers in the program,
Mm-hmm.
sponsors, meetings. Like, we need those, because those people can be the objective eyes that I do not have. Just like I get to be that for those other people too. Whereas they're further removed and not so emotionally attached to the situation, to where they can say, hey, man, like, from where I'm sitting, you got sunlight on you, and there's sunlight out there. And I know you can't see it, but I can. And I'm not the only one that can. There's other people around you that can see that there's sun beyond those clouds, man. You just kind of weather the storm a little bit before those clouds break, and boom, you're basking in the sunlight again. And what can I do for myself to get through this storm so that I can bask in the sunlight again? Because I truly believe, that's what recovery is letting things out into the sunlight, so that I can, you know, shed light on things. I got to shed light on things. I'm only as sick as my secrets.
Mm-hmm. Man, I love that you shared that about the other brothers and recovery, because that's so true. Especially as objective and hard as we are in ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
I remember how important it was to have other men in recovery at various stages of their recovery, right? Like, there's guys that I know that are 10 years into the recovery, and you're just like, man, that's possible. Like, you can do this for 10 years, especially early on. You're like, this happens. You can do that for 10 years. And, knowing guys that were 6 months ahead of me, or a guy that was a year or 2 years ahead of me, and just thinking, okay, I need to do what that guy's doing. It gives you an example. It gives you hope. And I think that was the greatest thing in recovery for me, was hope. And so meeting other men that, were 2 years in, and for me, for an example, were still married, and their wives, could come around to the fact of, hey, you know what? My husband can be a good man. Because I remember thinking, that's all I want. I want to be able to be that good man and that husband that my wife deserves me to be, the one that she signed up for when we said our vows, the one that I wasn't at that time, but the one that she deserves, the one that God created for her. And so I remember seeing that, because, yeah, there's a lot of good marriages out there, but to me, it's hard to say that there's better marriages than ones that are recovered.
Mm.
And I only say that speaking from my own experiences with recovery and stuff like that, but that's because, man, they've gone through some stuff together, dude. You talk about walking through the darkest part of your life with another human being that you hurt, and being able to discuss those things and have those very difficult conversations, and just truly leaning on each other and being able to come out on the other end. Like, man, you got to go to war, and it's hard. And being able to see other couples that have gone to war for each other, man, that's a whole different ballgame. It truly is. And there's a lot of love that comes out of that when it's done the right way. It's just, I get passionate about it, because it's like, man, I want to be able to be that type of example. And I feel like I'm still trying to do that every day, right? Like, I'm still trying to be a better husband. Because I know that the type of selfishness that came from who I was. But yeah, needless to say, to go back to what I was saying, the hope aspect, there's just, man, to me, there's nothing greater than hope that comes out of that. When you're seeing other guys that are able to be consistent and not constantly falling, because that's what's hard too sometimes, right? Like you get in these groups and there's guys that are constantly struggling and constantly falling, and you're hearing from them every week, and it's hard, right? Because then you start questioning yourself. You're like, man, is that going to be me? Is that going to be me? In 2-3 weeks? Um, but then I think it's also vital. That's why you get at those different stages, because when you're talking to a guy that's got 5 years under his belt and he's like, man, I've got a good length of sobriety to me, and he's got all these different things going on. That's who I want to mirror, right? Like I want to mirror what that guy's doing. Not everything, right? Like I'm not going to try and be that guy, but
Right.
man, that guy's got stuff going on that's like, hey, I need to learn from that, right?
Yeah.
Just like we do with anything in life, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
whatever job you're in, you're going to learn from the guy that's got the most experience. The one that's got it all figured, not all figured out, but the one that's got it figured out. That it's like, hey, I need to learn from that guy. He's doing it the right way.
Yeah.
And so that's all I want to be for other guys. Just like I'm sure you want to be. I want guys to be able to look and say, hey, you know what? What works for you? What are you doing that works? Because it's gotten you this far. You're doing something right.
Yeah.
And so yeah, man, that's the hope that I want to be able to provide, just like you.
Yeah. 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 And so you brought up two really good points that I wanted to expand on a little bit there. And that was, yes, that whole like, all right, like who's got more experience than me? And on the other hand, talking to the newcomer as well. Because I was giving I do like group education group classes in this treatment center that I'm working at. And one of the things, I was there yesterday and talking to all the clients. We had about 20 clients in there, and I said, hey, do you guys think that you guys can be of service to people? And they all were like, no, we don't. We're so new. And I was like, well, time out. I want to challenge that, because no, you absolutely can be of service. No matter where you're at in the game, like you can be of service, because when I go to a meeting and I'm sitting there and I'm listening to a newcomer who's hurt, and it's a good reminder to me of, what, like, wow, I remember being there, and man, I'm really glad that I'm not there right now. Let me be there for that person. So I told them, I was like, guys, you totally can be of service. I don't care if you've been in the program a day, a day or 20 years. Like, no matter what stage you're at, you have something to offer. And I know that I didn't see that. I mean, I still struggle with that. But I definitely earlier on, I did not see that I had anything to offer, when really, yeah, no, I had stuff to offer. I was offering a glimpse of, hey, this is where this will lead you if you keep doing what you're doing. And that is a really hurtful place and a painful place to be. Because my sponsor is really big on like, hey, go get the newcomer's number, because they need you more than you need them. And then also too, that idea of like, you talked about like a recovered relationship. And I'm a firm believer that as a sex addict, I have a lot to offer a partner, in the sense that, drugs and alcohol, because I'm also a cocaine addict as well. So, there is a complete and total abstinence from the substances. I don't ever want to go back to drinking or doing cocaine ever again. And while me not using, that's great. If I don't use, I'm sober. Whereas with sex, we are naturally sexual beings. That is a way to express, a way to procreate. So I don't want to be abstinent for the rest of my life. So I have to go in, I think as being sex addicts, we have to go in and uncover and overturn all the stones, so that I can healthily integrate it back into my life in a healthy way. And I think that really kind of gives us a different perspective, not saying that we're better than anybody else by any means. However, I think that when you're dealing with what we're dealing with in sex addiction, there's just, it's a different perspective than maybe some of the other programs that are out there. And I think that that's what really helps us in our relationships.
Yeah, I mean, it has to, right? Like, there's only two types of addiction that I would say can really relate in that sense, and that's food eating disorders and sex addiction, right? Because you can't not eat.
Yeah.
right? Like we have to eat. It's a requirement.
Yep.
Sex, on the other hand, isn't a requirement, but it is a way of connecting with our partner, in my case, my wife, and connecting in a way that's deep and meaningful and created by God. And it's extremely difficult when you look at it in the sense of within a marriage, right? Like a healthy marriage, you're going to have sex, right? Like that's part of it. That's what God created it to be. Could you be abstinent from sex? Yeah, you could. I mean, if that's something that you and your spouse agreed upon. But at the end of the day, a healthy marriage is going to involve sex. It's just a deeper form of connection that is unlike anything ever created, and that is why God created it the way that he did. And trying to navigate how to do that in the midst of trying to change your brain and all of, and the whole process that goes with that. Like you said, I mean, I'd venture to say there's nothing like it, right? Because how do you go back to something that caused so much pain and so much anguish in your marriage and try and find joy in it? How do you do that?
Yeah.
I remember thinking like, oh, I don't want to have sex anymore, ever. Like, I don't want to do that. Like this created this whole monster within me. I don't want to open that door back up, and so, you start dealing with all the shame that comes with it, all the pain that you're just like, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to ever integrate sex back into my life, because then what? And then your spouse starts to think, well, once we open that door, then his mind's just going to start thinking about it again, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a very difficult process when you start looking at it, and especially being the addict that hurts your spouse. I mean, speaking from personal experience, like there's stages in the very early beginnings of your recovery where a lot of spouses actually want more sex because they feel like that's actually going to solve the problem. Like, oh, if my husband if I just would have had more sex with him, that never would have happened. The spouse thinking that, there's absolutely nothing wrong with like feeling like that was the case, because they're just wanting to fix the problem. And it's not their fault for thinking it, but that's not what's true.
Yeah.
They could have had sex with you every single day and you'd still be in the same situation,
because
it's an internal problem. Mm-hmm. It's not an external problem. Yep. And so, then it's like, okay, well, it's not really healthy to what are you going to do? Tell your spouse no, in the midst of you hurting them and telling them all these different things and you acting out of your marriage, then it becomes, oh, well, you're willing to do that with another woman, but you're not going to do that with me now. And so, I mean, that it's mind blowing when you start thinking about like, how do I even do this? And I think one of the best things that me and my wife did was you have to create an abstinence period.
Yep.
And so you can do 30, 60, 90. My wife was like, nope, we're doing 90. I was like, cool, let's do it. Like that's what I need to change or rewire my brain. And it did. It did. It was, I don't want to say it was hard in that way, but it gave me an opportunity to really kind of start, instead of having sex, it was you were using that time to connect with your spouse in a different way.
Yeah.
Right. Through conversation, through spending time together, or whatever it was that you chose to replace that with. It gave a whole new perspective. And, just looking at it from the other side, like when you're 90 days in your recovery, you're a different person than you were, day one, so there's already some buildup. There's already some positive habits. There's already some mind shifting that's starting to work, and you're not, fixed, you're never fixed, but there's healing that has started to truly take place.
Yeah.
And so I think having those 90 days really kind of gave an opportunity to shift the way that I viewed sex, from it being something that was a requirement. I remember just thinking all the time, oh, I have to have it. If I don't have it, then, I'm not gonna be able to function. Mm-hmm. To, this is a way for me to connect deeper with my wife, for us to reach a level that's unmatched to anything else in life. Right. And just learning that it's not a need. It's truly not. And being able to go days without it was unreal for me. And now, if I go days without it, it's like, I don't think twice about how many days it's been since I've been intimate with her, Yeah. it doesn't matter. It doesn't change anything. It's not a depiction of where my marriage is. And that's how I used to view it was, well, we must be mad at each other. Or something must be wrong if we're not having sex, you know? And so just getting out of viewing it that way, and that has no bearing on where my marriage is. And so, it's one of those things that it does take a lot of time to change the way that you think.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that as men, our idea of intimacy is fully physical. I mean, I know that was definitely my view, because you kind of touched on it right there of like, oh, hey, it's been a few days since we've been physical together. Oh, something must be wrong, right? Because that was my idea of intimacy. Was there was no other aspects of it. It was straight physical, and that's how we are intimate. But even those, that kind of physical, intimacy it really wasn't intimate, because I wasn't sharing who I was. There wasn't anything else behind it other than purely it being physical. And then getting into recovery and realizing, oh, wait, there's so many more different aspects to intimacy, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, like, yes, physically, but once all the other ones are in line, then that's just an expression. The physical is an expression of everything else combined. So, going forward for me, I know that I look forward to that connection, because I can't say that I've ever truly had that real intimate connection with a female, with a partner, other than just the physical. But even that was just so surface level physical. There wasn't anything deeper than that. And so, like, it's exciting to think about that, hey, one day I get to have that. And I need to be careful though too, because then that turns into a need. Oh, well, I need to have this. Why don't I have this yet? I need to have this. When it's like, hey man, when the time is right, when it's God's time, that will come into my life. And if it doesn't, that's a possibility as well. But I have to trust that if that is a possibility, that I am just single for the rest of my life, that God's going to take care of me and help me work through that. But again, because I'm so quick to rush to it. I want to rush to it because, again, that core idea of a woman is going to fix all of my problems. And as we both know, that is not the case. And if you ever go into a room and share that you had the idea and the expectation that a woman was going to fix your problems, you can look around the room and see how many guys are shaking their heads going, oh, yeah, I believe that too. And, I'm grateful to say that I know that is not the solution, but I am excited for that whenever the time is right and God's decided to bring that person into my life. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think the problem that happens too is it creates an expectation, when you start expecting like, oh, this is going to happen, and what, kind of ends up having to transpire is you just kind of have to understand that, like you said, it's not a need, it's something that God blessed you with, and you get a chance to do it, in the way that he created it to be. And it's great, and it's awesome, and it's real, but it's also not something that I have to do to live my life, to grow into who I am. It's something that you get blessed with. And so, I think that it's just one of those things that you just kind of have to learn how that becomes a part of your marriage, right? Like, or you're part of your relationship, and just growing in that, and so it just takes time, it just takes time and learning each other and learning that other person, because it's not something that just all of a sudden happens, it doesn't just connect that way. But by you being healthy in your recovery, it gives you an opportunity to, like you said, you can present the real you have that mental space to present yourself emotionally, physically, and just actually connect with somebody that's unreal. And so, that's something that you'll get an opportunity to do someday, when God presents that person for you in your life.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, man. And also too, you kind of got to look at, like, I'm real big at looking at my capacities. What's my capacity for some of these things? What's my capacity for a relationship right now? What's my capacity for, friends and family, and that gives me an opportunity to be honest with myself. Honesty, rigorous honesty is another, kind of pillar of the program of recovery, of that I need to be completely and 100% honest with myself and those around me. And one of the ways that I've found that I can be honest with myself is asking myself, what is my capacity for these different areas of my life right now? And knowing that the capacity can change, things can ebb and flow, just like recovery. And so I really need to look at that and make note of that and be mindful of that capacity for these different things that I have going on in my life, because then I can definitely get into a spot where, like, I think I have a capacity. My capacity is one thing, and then I jump into it, and I'm like, oh wait, that really didn't work out. Okay, really, I need to revisit this capacity and see if am I lying to myself here? Am I holding the truth from myself around some of the capacity that I thought that I have? And it's okay if I don't have the capacity that I thought I had for that right now.
Yeah, and I mean, I fully agree with that. I think just kind of looking at what you have the capacity for, right? Like,
Yeah.
you only have so much space to be able to take on something, right? And so there's nothing wrong with having capacity for this one particular thing for this moment in time, right? Like, there's stages in our lives, right? Like, this is just that particular stage, a particular area that you're in your life in this particular moment. And it's okay to not have the capacity for it,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, if we had the capacity for everything, then we would never have to worry about anything. We would just be doing 15 million different things all at once, right?
Yeah.
But I think that's the best part of just realizing and knowing who you are and what you can control right now, right?
Yeah.
Like, that takes a lot of self-awareness, and that's awesome. Like, that's good recovery right there, right? Like, it's being able to be self-aware. Like, that's a huge step in our recovery. Like, that's graduate level learning, right? Like, that's
Absolutely. Yeah.
up here,
Mm-hmm.
because early on, when you're in, freshman year, you don't know how to be self-aware. You don't know how to do any of that stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like, we're like, man, I'm just lucky to go day by day and figure something out,
Yep.
and then you start getting to the point where you're like, you're self-aware. You can start to question yourself about things, and you can start to ask yourself questions that, start to make a little bit more sense. You're like, hey, that's graduate level stuff right there. That's how my therapist always kind of explained it was, you got freshman, sophomore year, and then you start getting to college, like, that's graduate level stuff. And when you start getting to that point, like, that's when you're really doing the work. And, you can see that work has progressed in you, and you can see that, there's starting to be a positive trajectory
Yeah.
in your recovery, and that there's actual growth. That's the hard part too, is you don't know that you have growth until you start to see some of those things. And that's where community comes in. That's when
Yep.
having brothers comes in. They're like, hey man, months from now, like, you got some growth, man. Like, you're starting to pick it up a little bit. You're starting to understand kind of where you are and what's going on in your own story and your own self. And one of the coolest things is having a discussion or conversation with another person that's in recovery, because you can just hear it in their words and how their mind's working, and the way that they're talking. You're like, as somebody that's in good recovery,
Yeah.
because you can just tell, like, those wheels are spinning. They're using the words that just make so much sense. You're like, that's a self-aware dude right there,
Yeah.
and that there's nothing better to me than being able to sit down and have a conversation with somebody that's at that level. Because I learned so much from them,
Yeah.
even if I have more, years under my belt, man, I can still learn so much for somebody that's just self-aware and it knows what's going on and where they're at in their recovery and what's going on and how to ask themselves the important questions. Because there's so much that comes from that, right?
It
Like,
really
that's
is.
recovery, is just questioning yourself. Hey, why did I do that? Why did I have that thought? Why am I leaning back onto whatever thought process it is when I'm feeling whatever emotion it is, right?
Yeah.
And so that self-awareness is it's so huge, man. And I love hearing that from you, because that's good recovery, right? Like, that's the thing, man. That's what we all aim to continue to do, is to just be self-aware and know, like, hey, this is what I need to work on, but hey, this is also what I'm doing really well, and I need to take that big victory home to the bank.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely, man. Again, you brought it up right there too, that measuring stick of growth. And again, it's really hard early on. It's really hard to see that, and that's why we need the community. And then as you graduate, you grow and progress in the program, you're able to see it more for yourself than ever. And when you can start seeing it for yourself, oh my gosh, like that is just a whole new level. It's a whole new ball game at that point in time, because then I can start validating myself. And, I still need other people to do it for me from time to time. Absolutely. But to be able to be from a place of, man, I can't validate myself or see what I have going on, to now being in a spot where like, oh, wow, I can see what I'm doing, and what I can validate myself through this. I mean, that's huge. And that's just kind of the beauty of the program, man. There's so many beautiful aspects and parts of the program that we get to live in every single day that, again, there's times where I take it for granted. Absolutely. I'm so worried about the flowers that haven't bloomed yet, to stop and look down around me and go, man, I'm in a sea of flowers, that let me stop and smell them real quick, because wow, I don't need to worry about the ones that haven't grown yet. They're going to grow, and I'm going to get there. So let me just take a minute to look around and bask in the sunlight and smell the flowers that are around me. Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, you said it, man. It's that self-validation is so huge, especially from somebody who struggles with validation, right? Like trying to reach that point where it was always getting that external validation, like you said, where it was just so important. That my self-worth was other people's external validation. Yeah. Like it wasn't my own validation, right? I couldn't validate myself. Mm-hmm. Whatever I said to myself didn't matter. Yep. I could have told myself X, Y, and Z, and it didn't change a thing. But if I was hearing things from other people like, hey man, you're an exceptional player in football, or, you're super smart, or you're really great at your job, or, whatever it was, or you're attractive, or, any of those words that I just was looking to hear, that was the only way that I could find that validation. And so now being in a point where it's like, man, the only way that I truly need that validation now is from God and from within myself. I mean, yeah, does getting validation from your wife hurt at all? No, not at all. It's nice when my wife will validate something for me. But that's not the only way that I can feel validated. Yeah. Her sole job is not to validate me. Yeah. Right? Like that's got to be in here. That's got to be inside. Because until I'm doing it myself, I can't give anything else. I can't give anybody any part of me that I'm not already taking care of myself. So, yeah, man, I fully get that. And I love to hear that too, that self-validation is so important.
So important, man. And we need to do it and need to strive to be there. And again, some days it's easier said than done. Some days it's really easy to see, it's just all about, okay, no matter what, no matter if I'm having a good day or a bad day, I'm still going to continue to do the things that I need to do for myself. And that yesterday's best is probably going to look a little different than today's best. And tomorrow's best is going to look different than today's best. And being able to roll with the punches and navigate things and try to stay in the middle of the boat the best you can, and know that there's going to be days where I'm not okay, and that is okay as well.
Yeah. I mean, you got to realize it's okay to not be okay sometimes, right? Like we can't be okay all the time.
Yep.
And sometimes it's okay to be that way, and to realize that you need help. Yeah. We needed help, and we weren't okay, but for so long we told ourselves that we were okay, and just coped with our addictions, like there was just one thing after another, we were just meeting legitimate needs in illegitimate ways over and over again. Mm-hmm. And so, it's always okay to say, you know what, I'm not okay. I got something going on. I got to figure out what it is. Because the minute that we keep telling ourselves, oh, I'm fine, it's not a big deal, it's whatever, it's really not, and until we dig deeper into whatever it is going on, we're just going to keep getting ourselves into a deeper spot that, we may compromise who we are, who we got, what we got going on. So yeah. I mean, I couldn't agree with that more.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Well, Cody, we've that hour filled up real fast. It always does. And again, man, I really appreciate the conversation. I mean, this was a great conversation. I had fun. I had a blast in sitting down and talking to you. And, we could go on for another 3 hours with this stuff. So I definitely, now that you've been a guest on the show, you are more than welcome to come back at any point in time. And I'd love to have you back on, man. Cause again, there's so many different aspects that we could expand on and go on and on and on about. And that's kind of another beauty of the program is like there's so much information, and there's so many different perspectives that we can learn from and take things from, even if it is just a small nugget. there's something that can always be taken away. So I'm going to take some things away from this conversation. And I really appreciate, again, man, just your courage, your bravery, your willingness to come on and share your story and have a conversation with me today, man. It means a lot to me, and I'm really glad that we got to finally make this happen. And yeah, man, I want you to come back on and looking forward, because I definitely want to talk more about the relationship and what some of the stuff you and your wife have done to build those routines and those habits to where, these are the things that you guys are living today that have helped you guys overcome and heal and grow together. Because I think that is so important, because I know that there's a lot of guys out there that are dealing with a betrayed partner, with a betrayed spouse, or significant other, whatever situation they're in, that they can learn from in that, again, that perspective. So I definitely love to have you back on again, man, and talk a little bit more about that. And again, man, thank you so much for coming on, man. I can't say that enough, how grateful I am to know guys like you in the program that are like, yeah, I'll absolutely come on and share my story. So thank you so much, Cody. I really appreciate it, man. It means a lot to me.
Yeah, brother. I mean, I appreciate you having me on here, and it was a privilege to come on and just kind of talk through, just have a great conversation with you, man. I loved every second of it, and I'd love to come back on and man, we can talk for a whole nother hour when it comes to marriage and how that process works. And I mean, I could probably talk for like 4 or 5 hours, to be honest with you. There's a lot that goes into it, man. But yeah, I'd love to come on. We can talk about that, as much as you want. But yeah, I love the opportunity to get on here and just talk with you. And, I had a great time just talking with you, and just, I'm going to take something away from this conversation too, take away some nuggets and just grow from this conversation. And so, I mean, there's nothing better than that.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Well, thank you for saying that, man. And I appreciate you coming on, and maybe until next time, man, keep coming back. It works if you work it, and you're worth it. And we'll see you guys next time.
All right, man.
Yeah, no, so